They told him the idea was stupid. They laughed at him across the table. A room full of Harvard Business School students sat there in 1974 and laughed at the man who built the biggest restaurant empire in human history. And the reason they laughed is because Ray Kroc stood up in front of that room and asked them a simple question. He said, "What business do you think I am in?" And every single student in that room said the same thing. "You are in the hamburger business, Ray. You sell hamburgers." And Ray Kroc smiled, shook his head, and said, "Gentlemen, I am not in the hamburger business, I am in the real estate business." And that one sentence changed the way the entire world understood how money actually works. Because what Ray Kroc built was not a fast food chain. What he built was the most genius invisible real estate empire that the world has ever seen. An empire so perfectly hidden inside golden arches and paper cups that billions of people walk past it every single day and never once see it. They smell the fries, they grab the bag, they drive away, and they have absolutely no idea that the ground beneath that restaurant, the land itself, the dirt and the concrete, belongs to McDonald's. And McDonald's is collecting rent on every single burger that gets flipped, every single morning, in every single country, on every single continent on this planet. And that is the story nobody tells you. That is the secret that turns a 15-cent hamburger into the greatest financial machine ever constructed by a human being. And to understand how this happened, you have to go all the way back to the beginning. Back to a man who was not young, not rich, not powerful. Back to a 52-year-old milkshake machine salesman named Ray Kroc, who was driving across America in a beat-up car trying to sell a machine that made 6 milkshakes at the same time. And most people at 52 are thinking about slowing down. Most people at 52 are thinking about comfort and safety and retirement. But Ray Kroc was not most people. Ray Kroc was the kind of man who woke up every morning with a fire in his chest that he could not explain and could not extinguish. And one day in 1954, he pulled into a small town in California called San Bernardino because he had received an order from a small burger restaurant that wanted not 1 but 8 of his milkshake machines. And that detail stopped him cold. Because who in the world needs 8 milkshake machines? So he drove out there himself to see it with his own eyes. And what he saw when he pulled into that parking lot changed his life forever. Because there was a line. Not a short line, not a polite line, but a massive, chaotic, hungry line of people, stretching out the door and down the street. And they were all waiting for the same thing. A cheap, fast, simple hamburger made by 2 brothers named Richard and Maurice McDonald. And Ray Kroc stood in that line and watched the operation. And his brain started moving 1,000 miles an hour. Because what he saw was not a restaurant. What he saw was a system. A perfect, repeatable system. Same burger, same size, same price, same speed every single time. And Ray Kroc understood something in that moment that the McDonald brothers themselves did not fully understand. He understood that this system was not just a restaurant. This system was a machine that could be duplicated, copied, stamped, and planted into every city and every town and every highway in the entire country. And then the entire world. And so he walked up to those 2 brothers and he said, "Let me franchise this. Let me take this idea and spread it everywhere." And the brothers said yes. And Ray Kroc went to work, and for the next several years, he did exactly what he promised. He opened franchises, he found operators, he built locations, and McDonald's started growing. But there was a problem, a massive, brutal problem, that almost killed everything before it even started. Because Ray Kroc was selling franchises, and the franchisees were paying fees, and those fees were supposed to fund the operation. But the numbers did not work. The money was not enough. The company was drowning in costs. Ray Kroc was working himself into the ground building an empire that was somehow still broke. And the food margins were razor thin because hamburgers are cheap, and the ingredients cost money, and the staff cost money, and the buildings cost money. And at the end of every month, Ray Kroc looked at the numbers, and the numbers were telling him the same terrifying story over and over again. This is not sustainable. This will not survive. And Ray Kroc could feel the whole dream starting to slip through his fingers. And it was at this exact moment of maximum pressure and maximum desperation that a man walked into Ray Kroc's life who would change everything. A financial genius named Harry Sonneborn. And Harry Sonneborn sat down across from Ray Kroc and looked at the problem and looked at the numbers and looked at the map of all these McDonald's locations spreading across America. And he said, "Ray, you are looking at this completely wrong. You are not a restaurant company. You are a real estate company, and you just don't know it yet." And that conversation, that single conversation between a desperate hamburger salesman and a quiet financial genius, that was the moment the most powerful business model in the history of commerce was born. Because Harry Sonneborn had seen something that nobody else had seen. He had seen that every single McDonald's franchise needed a location, and every single location needed land. And if McDonald's bought that land first and then leased it back to the franchisee, McDonald's would collect rent forever. Not just franchise fees, not just a percentage of sales, but actual rent every single month from every single location. Whether the burgers sold or not, whether the economy was good or bad, whether the world was in chaos or in celebration, the rent would always come in. And that idea, that one quiet revolutionary idea that Harry Sonneborn whispered into Ray Kroc's ear in a small, underfunded office in the middle of nowhere, that idea became the engine that would eventually power the most profitable corporate machine in human history. Because what Harry had understood was something so simple and so powerful that it almost feels obvious when you hear it. But nobody had ever applied it this way before. Nobody had ever looked at a fast food chain and seen a landlord hiding inside it. Nobody had ever looked at golden arches and seen a property portfolio. But Harry Sonneborn saw it with total clarity. And he explained it to Ray Kroc like this. He said, "Ray, every single person who wants to open a McDonald's franchise needs a place to put it. They need land. They need a building. They need a location. And right now, they are going out and finding that land themselves and signing those leases themselves, and McDonald's gets nothing from that arrangement except a small franchise fee. But what if McDonald's found the land first? What if McDonald's signed the lease first? What if McDonald's became the tenant of the landlord, and then turned around and became the landlord to the franchisee?" And Ray Kroc stared at him, and the numbers started clicking in his brain like tumblers in a lock, because suddenly he could see it. Suddenly, the whole architecture of the business shifted in his mind, and he understood that this was not just a smarter way to run a burger company. This was a completely different business disguised as a burger company. And so that is exactly what they did. McDonald's created a separate company called Franchise Realty Corporation. And this company went out and found land, secured leases on properties in high-traffic locations, and then rented those properties to franchisees at a markup. And suddenly, McDonald's had two streams of income flowing in at the same time. They had the franchise fees and the percentage of sales they were already collecting. And now on top of that, they had rent, real estate rent. The most reliable, most consistent, most recession-proof income stream that exists anywhere in the world of business. Because people stop buying luxuries when times get hard. People stop buying new cars and expensive clothes and fancy holidays. But people do not stop eating. And more importantly, landlords do not stop collecting rent. The rent comes in whether the economy is booming or burning. And that stability, that beautiful rock-solid predictability of rental income, that was what transformed McDonald's from a struggling franchise operation into an unstoppable financial fortress. And once this model was in place, everything changed. The growth accelerated. The money started flowing. The locations multiplied. And Ray Kroc, who had spent years being broke and desperate and laughed at, suddenly found himself sitting on top of something that the world had never seen before. And the more locations they opened, the more land they controlled. And the more land they controlled, the more rent they collected. And the more rent they collected, the more power they had to open even more locations. And it became a cycle so powerful and so self-reinforcing that stopping it would have been like trying to stop a river with your bare hands. And today, the numbers tell a story that is almost impossible to believe. McDonald's owns or leases more than 40,000 properties in over 100 countries around the world. And when you look at McDonald's financial reports, the thing that jumps out immediately is that real estate and rent is the core of how this company actually makes its money. Because here is the truth about McDonald's, that the golden arches and the happy meals and the billion-dollar advertising campaigns are all designed to make you forget. The burger profit margins are actually very thin. The food itself is not where the serious money lives. The serious money, the deep structural wealth of this corporation, lives in the land. It lives in the property. It lives in the fact that every single morning when a McDonald's franchisee unlocks the door of their restaurant and turns on the fryers and starts making coffee, before a single customer walks through that door, before a single dollar of revenue has been earned, that franchisee already owes McDonald's rent, already owes McDonald's money simply for the right to stand on that piece of ground. And McDonald's collects that payment in cities that are booming, and in cities that are struggling, in countries that are growing, and in countries that are shrinking, in summers and in winters, in good years and in terrible years, because that is the nature of land. Land does not care about the economy. Land does not have feelings. Land does not take a day off. Land just sits there and quietly makes its owner richer every single day without doing anything at all. And Ray Kroc understood this at a level that almost nobody around him could see. And so while his competitors were obsessing over recipes and cooking techniques and secret sauces and menu innovations, Ray Kroc was quietly buying land, securing locations, locking up prime real estate on busy intersections and high-traffic highways all across America, and then all across the world. And by the time his competitors looked up from their fryers and realized what was happening, it was already too late. Because McDonald's had already planted its flag on the best corners in the best cities, in the best countries on earth. And those flags were not made of paper. Those flags were made of deeds and leases and contracts, and they were not going anywhere. And this is the part of the story where it gets even more interesting. Because Ray Kroc did not just buy random land. He was strategic about it in a way that was almost military in its precision. McDonald's would identify growth areas before they grew. They would move into neighborhoods and towns and highway exits before the population arrived. Before the traffic built up, before the land became expensive. They would secure the location at low cost and then sit and wait while the world grew up around them, and the value of that land multiplied and multiplied and multiplied. And suddenly that piece of dirt that McDonald's had locked up for almost nothing was worth a fortune, and McDonald's owned it, and nobody could take it away. And this is the part of the story that most people never reach. This is the part that gets buried under the advertising, and the mascots, and the limited edition menu items, and the billion-dollar Super Bowl commercials. Because what McDonald's built in those decades of quiet, strategic land acquisition was not just a portfolio of properties. What they built was an economic moat so wide and so deep that no competitor on earth has ever come close to crossing it. And you have to understand what an economic moat means in the real world. It means that even if someone tomorrow invented a burger that tasted 10 times better than anything McDonald's has ever made, even if they had a superior product and a superior menu and superior service and superior technology, they would still lose. They would still struggle. They would still never reach the scale of McDonald's. Because they would be trying to build a restaurant empire without the land, without the locations, without the 40,000 properties already secured in the highest traffic, most valuable, most strategically positioned spots on earth. And you cannot replicate that. You cannot go back in time and buy that land at 1960s prices. You cannot recreate the decades of compounding real estate appreciation that McDonald's has been silently accumulating while the whole world was busy arguing about whether the fries were still as good as they used to be. And this is what makes the McDonald's story so much more than just a business story. This is a story about how the greatest competitive advantages in the world are almost always invisible. They are hidden in plain sight, disguised as something ordinary, dressed up in familiar colors with a familiar logo so that nobody looks too closely. Nobody asks the uncomfortable question. Nobody lifts up the golden arch to see what is actually underneath it. And what is underneath it is land, acres and acres and acres of some of the most valuable land on the planet, sitting quietly in the McDonald's balance sheet, appreciating in value every single year, generating rental income every single month, funding the marketing and the technology and the menu development that keeps the customers coming back. And those customers coming back makes the franchise more valuable, which makes the land more valuable, which makes McDonald's more powerful, and the cycle never stops. It just keeps spinning. It keeps compounding. It keeps growing. And this is the lesson that Ray Kroc understood at 52 years old, standing in a parking lot in San Bernardino, watching a line of hungry people waiting for a cheap hamburger. He understood that the hamburger was not the product. The hamburger was the reason people showed up. But the land was the asset. The land was the wealth. The land was the thing that would outlast every trend and every competitor, and every economic crisis, and every generation of customers. Because trends come and go, tastes change, competitors rise and fall, but land stays, land endures, land compounds, and the person who controls the land controls everything that happens on top of it. And Ray Kroc made sure that person was always McDonald's. And so when you drive past a McDonald's today, when you see those golden arches rising up against the sky, what you are actually looking at is one of the most valuable pieces of real estate in your city. And McDonald's put it there on purpose. They chose that corner on purpose. They signed that lease or bought that land on purpose. They positioned themselves exactly where the maximum number of people would pass by every single day. And they locked that position down so that nobody else could ever take it. And the franchisee inside that building is working hard every single day, managing staff and ordering supplies and serving customers and trying to make their business work. And they are doing all of that on land that belongs to McDonald's, paying rent to McDonald's, making that corner more valuable for McDonald's. And McDonald's is not flipping a single burger. McDonald's is not mopping a single floor. McDonald's is not dealing with a single difficult customer. McDonald's is simply owning the ground and collecting what the ground produces. And that is the purest, most elegant, most powerful form of business that has ever existed. It is the business model that kings and emperors and dynasties used for thousands of years before corporations existed. Control the land, and you control the economy that runs on top of it. And Ray Kroc did not invent this idea. This idea is as old as civilization itself. But what Ray Kroc did that was genuinely revolutionary was that he hid this ancient idea inside something completely modern. Something democratic and accessible and familiar. He hid a feudal land empire inside a fast food restaurant, and then he put a clown on the sign so that nobody would look too hard at what was really going on. And the final lesson of this story is perhaps the most important thing you will ever hear about money and business and wealth, because the lesson is not about burgers, and the lesson is not about franchising, and the lesson is not even really about real estate. The lesson is about looking deeper. The lesson is about asking the question that nobody else is asking. The lesson is about standing in that parking lot the way Ray Kroc stood in San Bernardino in 1954. And instead of seeing what everyone else sees, instead of seeing a restaurant, seeing the system underneath the restaurant, seeing the asset underneath the business, seeing the real game underneath the game that everyone thinks they are watching. Because the real game is never what it looks like from the outside. The real game is always quieter and deeper and more powerful than anything visible on the surface. And the people who win the biggest are always the ones who figured out what game was actually being played while everyone else was distracted by the burgers.